Welcome to What's in a Game, the podcast where Will and I wonder whether the Lakers were ever good or if they've actually sucked this whole time because we really can't decide. How are you doing
Wow,
today, Will?
I'm pretty good. I have a lot to say on the Lakers. Like I can get into some Lakers lore with you, especially with this coaching news, which we will do in this episode. But I'm also doing good because I was excited for Grace being on Hardwood Knocks the other day, and a lot of Nuggets fans were on Twitter who I interact with were very hyped about that. And I'm not sure if every Nuggets fan is familiar with Hardwood Knocks because Dan is often on Serbian Corner with Miroslav, who we all love. So there's like all kinds of connections and stuff that was so fun to see. For anyone listening now, please go listen to Hardwood Knocks and subscribe to them on all of their platforms because they're one of the funnest listens and a podcast that when we were talking about how we wanted our podcast to go, not that we like steal our segments or do a similar style to them, but we just appreciate what they bring to the table. And we talked about that when we were talking about podcasts we like and what we might want to try to do. We often brought them up. How did you enjoy that?
Yeah, no, like you said, so I consider myself to be a connoisseur of content, and I've always appreciated what Hardwood Knocks produces. Dan Favale, who I went on the show with, and his co-host Grant Hughes do a really great show covering all aspects of the NBA, X's and O's. They cover every team. They also talk about a lot of the off-season gossip type stuff that we do. But the episode that I did was, I think, actually really good. And I'm not great at complimenting myself, but I thought we had a really good dialogue. We talked about the Nuggets upcoming off season. We talked about the Orlando Magic coming off season because they're also my babies and I would like that team to keep getting better. But we also talked about game one of the NBA finals too. So you can check out some more of my thoughts on that there. But I thought it was a really good episode. So our viewers should definitely check it out.
Yeah, I thought it was a great episode. It was so funny for me to listen to because it's like all these worlds colliding. Because I listen to Hardwood Knocks, and obviously I do this podcast with you, so listening to it was awesome for me. Just and it was very natural too to see you guys talk. And I know you've interacted before on Twitter, so it was cool to see you guys connect on that format and talk some Nuggets, Magic, and Game One. We didn't cover Game One on this show. We were gonna like let the two games go and talk about what we saw, which we'll jump into in a second. But it was good to get your guys' game one reaction. We are starting off kind of focusing on Boston's defense. On our NBA Finals preview, I had kind of said that I wasn't as worried about the Mavs offense and that I was more concerned with their defense and how they're going to slow the Celtics down. Unfortunately, the Celtics defense is really creating challenges for the Mavs. They put Jason Tatum on their center. They're putting him on Lively and Gafford, which is causing problems for the Mavs getting to their pick and roll because Luka really loves to work with roll threats. The lob
Yep.
was why they were able to get this far in the first place. That is being completely neutralized by the Celtics, which is making this series really rough for them. And this might just be another case of a bad matchup and just not being able to capitalize on things that you do well, which we've been seeing throughout this playoffs.
Yeah, so this is the case for both game one and game two, how they've put Jason Tatum on the center, whether it's Gafford or Lively. And so they can switch all of those pick and rolls with Luka, neutralizing, like you said, the lob threat. But I think the bigger story of why this is possible and like in the most effective way for Boston is how good they are at the point of attack. We talked about in our series preview how Luka can basically cook every one of these Celtics one on one, and we thought actually that Tatum would be the best matchup for him, but that does wear him down. And the fact that every single perimeter defender on the Celtics has enough strength to wear Luka down when they're guarding him at the point of attack and he tries to go into a pick and roll, whether it's with Lively or with somebody else because he's trying to draw Al Horford or Kristaps into the action. So he's kind of using whichever Maverick they're defending. You just see like Luka get continually worn down as the game goes on. So even in both games, he started off super efficient, especially in game 2. Like he was just on absolute fire.
Yeah, the first half was amazing.
And I think in the fourth quarter, he only made 1 field goal. So that's another part of the defense is just continually wearing him down. But
and he looked worn down in the second half. He just like
really
looked tired and
on both ends. I wanted to give a special shout out to Jaylen Brown because the fact that he can consistently have an acceptable defensive possession on Luka and multiple times get stops. In game 1, he actually ripped Luka just like straight at the point of attack from well beyond the arc twice and got breakaway dunks off of those. In game 2, he just stood him up really well on his drives because he's quick enough, but he's got enough length and just enough strength to bother every single thing that Luka does, just enough that even if Luka's scoring on him sometimes, Boston never feels the need, especially when Jaylen is on him, to overhelp off of the other Mavericks. So they can't get as involved in the offense. I know you wanted to talk about Drew Holiday on Luka or on other Mavericks. What was it about his game that you wanted to point out in the first 2 games?
Well, I was thinking a lot about Drew on the offensive end just because he was the leading scorer in game 2.
Yeah.
We were kind of talking about how he is a similar kind of makeup to Lou Dort in a way where he's like shorter and stockier and he can guard a lot of different positions. And I did think he was going to start the series out on Luka instead of like Jaylen Brown. But the Celtics just switch so much and they don't blitz Luka at all. Different people are guarding Luka at all times. And I think Drew has held up on basically everyone very well, especially Kyrie. And Kyrie even tried to like back him down a little bit or get a bump or something, and Kyrie can't get any space for his interior game. There are times where then I feel like he's settling for threes, which reminded me of Nuggets Wolves because it's like, dang, they're having such trouble getting inside that they're just settling for shots. The Celtics are very disciplined on defense, more than I thought that they would be, and it's from like everyone on the team. Because I had said too in the preview, which I was wrong about, that even if the Celtics like 3 through 5 are like, Luka's the best player in the series, if you're ranking them, the 3 through 5 are the best. Now I'm thinking it's like 3 through 8, like are playing the best, which is a team result that they're just playing together well. And it's just the fact that they're making Kyrie and the other Mavs players struggle that I would say that. But like Pritchard was holding up against Kyrie. Like Kyrie is like, you got to score on that somehow. Like, or even Al Horford was doing way better. The way that Derek White is aggressively positioning himself on the nail or whatever it is to deter certain shots. But one thing that I wanted to ask you about is the blitzing and or doubles on Luka, because we had also said that they're not going to let Luka distribute because he's so good at that. They don't want him to have a ton of assists. They don't want to get beat by the other Mavs players. But I did kind of think in game 2, they were showing a little more help than I expected. And they were more willing to let the other Mavs shoot, and they all missed. Like it was not a great shooting night for them. So did you have thoughts about that? Because we were also saying we didn't think the Mavs did anything tactically significant.
Yeah. So in game 1, it was made clear to Dallas, based on the way that Boston was defending, that Boston was not going to give up any corner threes. And also, for the most part, when Luka was ISOing, he was settling for his pull-up 3 a lot. He would get into the paint some, but it was usually kind of in that short mid-range area, maybe just outside the paint. In game 2, it seemed like Dallas was doing a lot more to get downhill, both with Luka and Kyrie. Obviously, Luka in greater volume because Kyrie has really just been very ineffectual, particularly in this series. But they were driving with Luka a lot and hunting the above the break 3 because they knew it would be there. And so they did get more wide open threes. They didn't make them. The role players didn't make them. It was PJ, it was Derek Jones Jr. Mostly who got them. I think Kyrie got one as well that he missed. Both teams actually shot pretty poorly from three in this game, but I felt like the looks that, say, Boston was able to generate a lot more corner threes, which are shorter threes and role players in particular, they tend to shoot better from the corners than above the break. PJ Washington has a pretty big disparity there in these playoffs. Someone was comparing him to, like, oh, he turned into Ray Allen for a series against the Thunder, but like all of those threes were corner threes. In this series, he's only getting the stuff above the break. When you talked about the way that the Celtics, like all of their role players, are able to have this massive impact by making the Dallas role players and Kyrie too look as bad as they do, I wonder, like, well, why is it that the Dallas role players can't do the same thing to Boston? I guess that gets into, I guess, talking a bit about the Mavs defense, but just kind of philosophically speaking, like, what am I going to do as a role player in a playoff game? I'm trying to make an impact on one end of the floor or the other. If you're not making shots, like, you need to get a stop. When we get into the Mavs defense, like I will have like very specific criticisms of Luka, but one of the things with this team is like they're very specifically constructed. Like we talked about in our series preview, how the Mavericks are a much better defensive team now with more defensively slanted personnel than they were before the trade deadline, but they're a much worse offense, so their defense has to carry them, and that's kind of like that's just like a philosophical like question that I have. Like, okay, sometimes it isn't always possible to like hide your star on defense, but like if the players that were brought into the team were there to improve the defense of the team and they're not contributing on offense, shouldn't there be maybe a little bit more responsibility put on them to continue to contribute by making defensive plays?
Yeah.
When you look at the Boston Celtics, in this game, they were very cold from three, except outside of a couple of stretches. Down the stretch of this game, they actually like were kind of nails. They made the big shots that they needed to, but everyone was cold. It wasn't just role players. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, very cold from three. They shot 25% from three as a team, but you had big plays from Derek White, Drew Holiday. Like Derek White had this crazy block on PJ Washington. This was in the clutch that would have cut the game down to three. It was off an outlet pass from Luka. Those kinds of plays were happening really throughout the game that were just timely stops. Drew Holiday forced a turnover on like a bad pass from PJ Washington when Drew Holiday was like, I'm on Luka, I need to deny Luka the ball. This was in the clutch as well. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Mavs turnovers, like you said, whenever Mavs felt like maybe they're getting a little bit of momentum, Boston defense just made a big play.
And that's what their role players were doing that for the most part. It wasn't really Tatum and Brown who were contributing in their own different ways. But that's one of the big differences that I've seen through both games, actually. And game one was a blowout, but it was pretty close through most of it. But there were these kind of key stretches where it felt like the Boston role players in a big moment kept making a shot when they needed to, or getting a block. Like they had like, I think 9 blocks as a team or something in game one, which was big. A lot of that was Kristaps Porzingis. We definitely have to talk about his impact overall in this matchup. But it was also, again, Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown got really important blocks on Derek Jones Jr., acting as, secondary rim protection on this team where everyone is super dialed in, particularly defensively, on every possession. And I think that's a big glaring difference between these two teams, in addition to the sort of aggregate like talent gap stuff.
The Celtics, I hate to say it because I'm not a Celtics fan, but for you Celtics people out there, if I had to classify them as a team, like organism, they're like a 3-and-D player. If a 3-and-D player was a whole team, because they obviously three-point shot is key to their identity, but every single one of their players can shoot, and almost every single one of their players can defend reasonably well. And the Mavs have not been able to punish anything that Boston's defense has been doing, as far as like making the above the break threes if they're showing help, or beating one of the matchups in ISO. Like Luka obviously can win any ISO possession against probably anyone on that team, but you can't rely on that to win this series because Kyrie can't do it. He's been struggling with basically anyone who's been guarding him. I think his reads also hasn't been as good. Like even when they did run double screens, because I saw some people asking, why aren't they running more double screens or why aren't they doing this? When they ran double screens and they just switched it, like Kyrie just passed it away to like PJ, and then he would just have to drive it off of like they didn't get any advantage
Off of no
that.
advantage, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. They're not creating advantages.
It's just not going to do it in the finals. You cannot afford to be this stagnant.
Passive and stagnant. Yeah.
They did have a couple possessions where even like setting a very high screen, almost like it was, I don't know if it was in transition, but it was mid court. Luka had that like long pass, empty side, which gave the whoever that was, gave the roll man room to score. I don't know if there's anything the Mavs can build off of that offensively, but it does suck that basically the biggest thing that they have to do is just make more shots. Like the role players are just going to have to step it up a little bit, but otherwise Boston kind of has them on lockdown.
As much credit as I want to give Boston's defense, and I do, because I do think that it has been the most elite part of this team throughout the entire season. Like everyone talks about this like offense, and they have they take and make all of these threes, and they have all this spacing, so they get high quality shots most of the time anyway. But they were second in defense on the year, and that's because everyone on the floor is super dialed in. It's one of the reasons that it was hard, I think, for some of the all defense voters to pick one player to give it to. They ended up giving it to, I think it was both Derek White and Drew Holiday that made all defense, right? But I also think that Dallas is not putting enough pressure on this defense. Part of it is personnel, right? I actually noticed in game one, the very first possession was a post up for Daniel Gafford because they had Tatum on him. And he actually forced help, kicked out to Derek Jones Jr. for a three, and they got it. He switched it. In game two, there were multiple possessions where both Luka and Kyrie were intentionally trying to post up Gafford. And some of them, it resulted in layups and dunks. And I'm always worried about if Gafford's actually going to finish anything. But he was actually really good. I thought he has been pretty just good in these games. And defensively, we'll get into the Mavs defense, but defensively, I don't think the Mavs problems have anything to do with Daniel Gafford and his limitations, actually, especially on like getting offensive rebounds, like all that kind of stuff. He's just been solid for the most part. In game one, I do think that he got bullied around by Drew Holiday for sure. But in game two, he really like brought a lot more physicality and just wasn't going to let Drew like push him around, which was a really nice response to see, frankly. Like regardless of how this series goes for the Mavs, one of the comparisons I had for it was how AG responded after the Warriors series and how sort of Draymond not just like pushed him around, but like forced him to bad shots, like all of that stuff, and like taught him how to be a smarter and tougher player. And I wonder if like this series sort of gives Gafford a similar, not transformation, right, but like outlook and how to like consistently like play tough like that, because it's a similar story, right, with Gafford coming from basically a tanking team to now he's suddenly like starting on a contender, and you have this like experienced veteran on another team that's teaching him lessons, whatever. However you want to describe it.
Yeah, the only player on the Mavs that has that kind of experience is Kyrie.
Yeah.
Luka, obviously,
and he's not playing like it.
So. Yeah, he's not playing like it. So, yeah, the one person you had who, like, has been in this tough series. But
the only champion. Like, he's...
Yeah, the only champion.
He's their champion.
The Cavs were down to the Warriors really bad. Obviously, they came back to win that. Are we going to have some kind of storyline like that in this series? I seriously doubt it. I kind of feel like it's over. I feel like the Celtics are going to easily win this, but you never know. Is Kyrie going to come back and play amazing offense and give the Mavs a chance? We will see. But I'm glad you did bring up Gafford because I wanted to talk about that too before we moved to the Mavs defense. Just because, in the third quarter, he had 2 post-ups in a row where he scored. And we had been asking, like, could we just get some possessions from Lively and Gafford where, like, they could take someone one-on-one in the post and just score? Because that would really help them.
I don't know about Lively because I haven't really seen him effectively post up anyone that wasn't, like, a guard and he gets, like, a little hook shot. So I will say on that, on the Gafford stuff, they were trying to post him up and they were successful in some instances. There were other possessions that I remembered. It was very clear that both Luka and Kyrie were trying to post Gafford up, but whoever was on Gafford was successful in sort of pushing him either out of the paint, or Gafford's not like good at sealing. So once he loses his initial position advantage, it just ends up wasting time off the clock as we're kind of waiting for Kyrie or Luka to make that entry pass, and then he can never get position, and then they have to like figure something else to do on that possession. But if he were better at that, and who knows, maybe he does as the series goes on,
Hmm. Yeah.
whether it affects the outcome of this series or not, that's maybe something like an area of growth for him in the future, perhaps, because he has been successful once he's been able to post up. But if he loses his initial advantage when he's trying to seal, then he just kind of gives up on it. And I wonder if they're going to emphasize that more or not, because they actually got, I mean, when I say they got decent offense out of it, their offense is so stuck in the mud that a Daniel Gafford post up is perhaps better offense than things they're going to get on most possessions, particularly late in the game when Luka is like totally gassed and like can't hit his jump shots anymore,
Yeah, like you can point to things that the Mavs could do
which is like bad.
on theory or like on paper, but it's like how well can they execute that once
Yeah.
they do try it? And I think with some of their personnel, some of the answers that people are coming up with, even if they try it, I don't know how much it's going to work, which is why I'm feeling pretty pessimistic about the Mavs' chances.
Yeah.
The other thing is like Maxi Kleba is, I don't know what he's providing for you. He's killing your spacing out there at the moment. The Celtics are not respecting him, so I
And
don't
he's not
know.
shooting. Like he's not giving them a reason to respect him.
Hmm.
Like, he's not even taking the shots is the
Yeah,
thing.
and then on defense, it's even worse. I think because Drew even like took it to him, and it was no resistance.
Yeah, I think
Um,
he's been okay on switches. Yeah, Drew took it to him, but Drew was kind of cooking
yeah, I
everybody in
guess
this
that's true.
game. So it's kind of like, well, I guess it's on a curve, right? So Kleber's like, I don't know, he's fine compared to like the rest of the starters. So whatever,
Yeah,
but
in this scenario
yeah.
though, where it's the NBA Finals and it's like, oh God. I mean, Derek Jones Jr. had some like he had a little interesting scoring run where he got like a steal or like he got a transition dunk or like he had a nice like cut dunk in the third quarter. Can they get more out of Derek Jones Jr. somehow? And we even talked in the series preview about the Mavs possibly capitalizing on some of the Celtics switching, like with their rebounding and such. And I do agree with you about Gafford and like how he was putting in the effort. And I did see more effort from the Mavs in trying to be intentional about those little things like rebounding and making sure you're not giving this to
Yeah.
Boston. But it still just like wasn't enough. Or like when PJ Washington's
Yeah.
airballing a three, you can't rebound it. Like, so
Right,
I don't
right.
know.
No, I agree with that. The offensive rebounding is tough because Boston, although they're not a great defensive rebounding team over, like they're not like an elite defensive rebounding team or anything like that. But there's no one on the Mavs besides Lively we should talk about this, that Kristaps is coming off the bench, and so Lively now has to play opposite somebody who is more formidable
Hmm.
than, say, one of the things in the OKC series is that Lively often, although he was still impactful when Chet was on the floor, when Chet was off the floor, Lively was absolutely crushing those units. And so the Mavs no longer have the edge in those bench minutes just by virtue of Lively being this legit 7-footer who's a really great both defensive and offensive rebounder, because they have Kristaps out there. And the other thing that Kristaps being out there for basically all of Lively's minutes, I remember there was one possession that ended in like a Lively dunk, and I think Al was on the floor. And I noted that, like, oh, Kristaps hasn't been pulled off the bench yet. He hasn't come in the game yet. And Joe immediately called a timeout, and I'm pretty sure Kristaps was on the floor the very next possession. That's something else to give Boston credit for. I think Missoula has figured out pulling the right strings on the different matchups so that you're not putting yourself in a disadvantageous position for no reason. I think the Wolves figured out later into the series, we talked about how Lively started losing his minutes. The Wolves figured out that they needed to play Rudy basically whenever Lively was on the floor. So even though Rudy was starting, he was basically playing not double duty, but bigger minutes than normal because he also had to be on the floor whenever Lively was on, and they had to figure out the rotations in that way. So it's almost like Kristaps, he had the calf strain, final start, he's finally back in the rotation. He's been out for a month. He's not officially on a minutes restriction, but it's pretty clear from the low minutes load that they're not trying to play him too much. I think he only played 23 minutes in game 2. But he's coming off the bench because Al has been starting and Missoula doesn't want to maybe interrupt that or whatever it is, overplay Kristaps. Like, I don't actually think that the reason Kristaps is coming off the bench initially was because of matchup with Lively. But they maybe learned that, like, oh, this like really, really works in game 1, and then they're keeping up with it. I don't know if that ever changes and Kristaps goes back to starting, but it's almost like a happy accident for the Celtics that KP is coming off the bench because they never have to learn the lesson of experiencing those bench minutes with Lively on the floor without someone that can match him there.
Yeah, that really has worked out for them. KP obviously has had a big impact on this series so far, and we can kind of talk about that as well if we transition to the Mavs defense.
We have to talk about the Mavs point of attack defense. Like, that's
that's
the story of this series when you really think about it, because if the Mavs just can't stop Boston at all and sort of mitigate the thing that I think is less elite than Boston's defense, which is their offense, although it is highly lauded and the numbers say it's great. But if you can't stop the Celtics at the point of attack, or at least slow them down, then you're going to be in rotation against a team that takes advantage of teams in rotation. And when you're looking at the Mavs defense, they're not a team that is great existing in rotation.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think the Mavs were doing themselves any favors. Sometimes I was like, you're making it too easy to be put in rotation. Like, yeah, Boston can put it upon you, but don't put it upon yourself. Because, yeah, Luka was very tired in the second half, and his defense and offense suffered. But defensively, like, times where he was just watching the ball and then letting people sneak by him get rebounds. There was times where he wasn't ready to rotate, and Kyrie's pushing him to go close out on Tatum, and then he's closing out so hard, and it's like so easy for Tatum to just get around him.
Celtics were ready for the hard closeouts today. They were basically just like, let's just keep driving and kicking until we absolutely 100%. They were actually just going from good to great on every shot in this game. I thought in game 1, the difference in the two offenses was that Boston's, all of their guys, role players included, had like a very green light to take even like semi-contested shot, first open 3, whatever. It felt like in game 2, Boston, they were very cold from 3 to start the game, and it basically carried out through the rest of the game. So for the most part, the threes that they were taking were like after like 3 separate drive-in kicks on the same possession. And, you know, Jaylen Brown is like really tough to stop when he's going downhill, especially when he's attacking off the catch in a drive-in kick as opposed to initiating. And then Tatum as well, even though we could talk about Jason Tatum as like a separate part of this, because I don't know that the reason that Tatum scored as inefficiently as he did had really anything to do with the Mavs defense.
Right. Attacking the closeouts was a huge story, but I'm like really wondering if they're going to adjust anything with Tatum specifically, because he is struggling. His jump shooting is down. His 3-point shooting is down. Is he going to score at the rim a bunch still? Probably. Is he going to hit his open shots? Probably. I'm not trying to say Jason Tatum's not an elite player, but if I'm trying to guess anything that the Mavs could do, I would say don't guard him with 3 people in the paint. Don't have...
What did he have, 8 assists in the first half of this game? In game 2?
I don't know. He had a lot, but he ended up with 12 assists.
Okay, yeah.
And it was like easy stuff too. Like, I'm not saying he's not a good playmaker, a good passer or whatever, but like when you're hard closing out on him,
easy with his spacing though.
Yeah, that's true too. It's just
like
what the
we talked
Celtics
about
do
in the preview.
When you're closing out hard and he's getting around you easy, and you have Derek White or Drew in the dunker spot, or just in the corner 3 or whatever it is, Tatum's reading it, and I guess he had a couple turnovers, which you can hope for, but you don't.
He had a lot fewer than game 1. That was something big, right? Because I forget how many assists he finished with, but it was like 6 turnovers, maybe like 8 assists, 6 turnovers in game 1. I think I remembered thinking after game one, oh, maybe the Mavs keep doing this collapse defense on Tatum because they like that he had 6 turnovers. But we also talked about in our series preview how Boston's spacing makes making decisions once you get into the paint very, very easy. And so once he like learned the basics of how the Mavs were going to keep guarding him, which is like collapsing 3 guys on him in the paint at any given time, he can just throw the ball anywhere and one of the Celtics is going to catch it. I actually thought even so we're going to talk about his scoring struggles, but I think his overall play has been very good.
Yeah,
He's
for
defending
sure.
well. He's rebounding at a high level. All of that stuff. What does it actually mean to be a superstar in the Celtics? Apparently, it means that you can have 42% true shooting in a finals game, but still have a positive impact because you're guarding Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford sometimes, and switching out onto Luka and rebounding and driving and kicking. One of the things that you can definitely give Tatum credit for in this game and in game one is that he was constantly getting downhill and creating for the rest of the team rather than focusing too much on creating his own shot from the perimeter, which he still did a couple of times in this game, particularly on switches onto the bigs. However, for the most part, like he's getting downhill a lot and is sort of initiating a lot of these very efficient drive and kick sequences for the Celtics, which is allowing their offense to, for the most part, sustain a very like competent flow. They're attacking Luka a lot at the point of attack, just getting him on switches and beating him off the dribble, and Luka is not recovering to whoever he needs to X out to usually most of the time. And it's a good game plan, right? Because on defense, the Boston Celtics are saying, well, Luka's the only one you can actually score on us, so we're going to let him get his for the most part, maybe make it tough on him a little bit, sometimes make him throw it to the role players a little bit later in the rotation, a little bit deeper in the clock at odd angles so that it's not as comfortable to maybe take the shot immediately. And then as the game goes on, they're just attacking him on defense, just one-on-one. And it's not just like I said, in the case of Tatum, it's really about beating him off the dribble and getting into the teeth of the defense, less so than creating their own shot. And I think Jaylen Brown has really been very good at that. He's getting off the ball faster when he starts to see a crowd. And that has been another important part of just keeping this offense flowing. Every single Celtic is doing that. And that's a big difference, I think, than maybe what a lot of fans think of as a 3-and-D player versus a legitimately good closeout attacker. Because attacking a closeout can be taking a spot at 3. It can also be driving into the defense and maybe if no one's there, like you just get a shot at the rim. It could also be, beating your initial defender that's closing out on you off the dribble, forcing the help rotation and then kicking out to somebody else and making those right reads. And that's the thing is like they're not just the kind of traditionally thought of as 3-and-D players. So they're all really good closeout attackers, and it comprises every one of those components, whether it's the shooting, the driving, the ability to make the right decision. And like we said in our series preview, again, the Boston Celtics spacing and their spacing principles. It's not just the fact that they have 5 players out there who can shoot at any point. They're always, moving in different spots to create the optimal, driving lanes and space for whoever does have the ball. It means that nobody on the team ever has to make a really difficult decision with the ball when they do have to make a play, which is kind of one of the things that like surprises people when they see the Celtics have their kind of dumb basketball sequences. And you're like, what are you doing? Like, it's like, so that's why we criticize this team, is because their system and their personnel makes it all so easy that you're like, how do you ever mess it up?
Yeah. Well, that is the beauty, I guess, of this team. I think every superstar in the league would love to only have to perform to this standard of, on offense at least, in scoring, of Jason Tatum and still be up 2-0 in a series. Because, yeah, Jason Tatum's doing great on defense. It's part of the reason why the Mavs are struggling so much is just Jason Tatum. if I'm him, I'm working on my three and my pull up jumpers, in shoot around or whatever it is, because I don't know if Jason Kidd's going to try to do some scheme thing where they're staying home more on everyone else when Tatum has the ball.
That's what I
And,
said he should do.
and yeah, just trying to make him make some over the top shots.
Turn
Don't
Tatum
close.
into a scorer.
Yeah, don't close out super hard so he can just drive around you. Close out short and dare him to shoot. Yeah, Tatum's a great player. Is it disrespectful to maybe do that? Yes. Could you get burned on it?
I mean,
Yes.
they're doing it to
But
Luka.
yeah,
They make him make all the shots. Maybe he does get hot from three, and maybe that just like kills you. But even though I thought the Mavs would have to change the way they defend on the whole, like just complete overhaul. Maybe they just lean further into what got them there. Lean into packing the paint. Lean into make the Celtics make 33s in a game, and don't let them have anything in the paint. Easier said than done because all the Celtics have been cooking the Mavs off the dribble, particularly Luka and Kyrie. But if you're doing this, if you're closing out short, for example, or going under on whatever screens, although again, the Celtics, they're not a
yeah,
high volume pick and roll team. They run a lot off ball to get open. Maybe you just kind of go extreme, especially at this point where you're trying to just find something that works so that you don't go down 3-0.
yeah. Well, I know you're just saying like maybe they should pack the paint and not let anything, but I would at least like live with Tatum having to score in the paint.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
like, five people in the paint and he has an easy spray out or like has an easy dump off to Drew in the dunker spot. Like maybe you should stay home a little bit. Don't just assume he's just going to hit everything because he's Jason Tatum. Like actually see if he can do it, because that's going to help your offense if you can maybe force some misses off Tatum. But I think the series is over. So like suggesting like maybe the Mavs could do this or do that. This is going to be hard for them to come back and win 4 out of 5 against the Celtics.
Right. At this point, it's really just about like, can they make it a series? It's not really can they win it, because I just think they have too many disadvantages on
Hmm.
both ends of the floor. And
Yeah.
Luka's not, he can't do everything, and he's still got the knee stuff or whatever. And the Celtics are just going to keep coming at him. So yeah, I do think it's tough. One of the things that you mentioned earlier, and I was half joking about this on Twitter. You talked about Maxi Kleba being out there, and it's like, well, they could cook him. But someone was talking about how the Mavs have barely played Tim Hardaway Jr. in this series, and at first I agreed with that because I thought, they really like their defense needs work, and like he's missing shots anyway, so how much could he really help on offense? And who knows if the Celtics would even respect his spacing or anything? Maybe he does make a couple of shots. But defensively, I had the thought that it might be interesting if you had multiple people out there that the Celtics might want to attack on defense. Like we talked about it with just Luka and Kyrie, I think, in our series preview. Like maybe it just confuses the Celtics a little bit, or at the very least just gives them another target to go after to kind of
That's
save
not
Luka's
Luka.
legs.
Yeah.
It's like, okay,
That's
you go
what
be the sacrificial lamb. Like they're not stopping the Celtics right now anyway.
yeah.
So maybe you just play your worst defenders and hope that they can give you something on offense
Put a
and
giant red
see.
target out there for them. That's not Luka.
No, I actually mean that. I
Yeah, yeah.
actually mean
It's
that.
kind of interesting. I
Like,
like it.
and if nothing else, like it would save Luka's legs so that he could keep making his jump shots throughout the game, right? And if the Celtics don't attack, say Tim Hardaway Jr. on defense, and like you don't make him a complete liability, then I mean it's not that those things are mutually exclusive, because if he's like messing up on his closeouts, and it only happened because Luka couldn't stop the ball at the point of attack, that it
Hmm.
results in a swing and all of that. At this point, let's try something, because right now the game looks pretty cooked, and the Celtics have them completely in the mud on both ends of the floor. Like the Celtics themselves, like their offense looks very, very comfortable and has through 2 games.
And thinking about Luka's legs and him being tired from the defensive end, because he can get his own shot in isolation, and even if it's not the ideal pick and roll matchup for him operating with people on his hip, no matter who it is, on the Celtics. Like he'll get a shot. It may not be the best one he could ever get, but he was doing a ton of little like one leg step backs where he was making them. He didn't hit every
He's
single one, but
making crazy stuff in this
yeah.
game, man.
They did also run like XM sets, like this very weird, uncontrolled down screen for Luka that freed him up. And I was thinking, how often are the Mavs like running something where they're trying to
For
free
Luka
up
off the
Luka?
ball. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And is that beneficial? Like, is that going to tire Luka out that he's running off the ball? Or is that something that's going to help him? And
Okay.
then I thought,
Yeah.
just real quick, and then I thought, should they be doing that for Kyrie, like, instead? You know?
Why are they not running more things for the person who's off the ball when both of them are on the floor, and when only one is on the floor, have another ball handler there? And they have done that, but they're not really using them as much. I do think that like Exum played more in game 2 because he was playing better. Jaden Hardy they got some minutes in the second half because they need a little bit more, I think, offensive punch. But I completely agree. Like that's one of the things with my critiques of the Mavs offense, regardless of on if they would have like won either of these games or could have won this series, is that I'm not seeing the Dallas Mavericks attempt enough things to try to put more pressure on the Celtics defense as much, for all the Celtics fans out there, like I'm giving the Boston Celtics a lot of credit on their defense. We already talked about how they neutralized some of the little like adjustments and things that the Mavs tried, but there are other things that Dallas has just not even gone to. And when they
Yeah.
do, like you're talking about this down screen with Exum handling the ball to get it to Luka coming off the screen, they didn't go back to it. It would be like the play after a timeout, and then they'd go back to ISOs. So it's
Hmm.
like kid clearly knows what needs to happen, and I don't know if it's like a thing where the team isn't doing that stuff consistently, like the players aren't doing those things consistently, or the game is just getting too out of hand, like whatever it is. The offense for the Mavericks doesn't feel very deliberate in terms of approach. Obviously, the way that Luka approaches his isolations, that feels deliberate. But on any given possession, I'm just like, I don't know what you're doing. And it's even on the ones where I think they tried to go to some Luka Kyrie 2-man game late in this, but it was just clear side. Luka hands Kyrie the ball, and I think he had Tatum in front of him, and then Drew was kind of shading him. So like away from Luka. Luka could have flashed middle or like moved or done something to get Drew out of the way. Or Kyrie could have given him the ball, and now Luka can attack that advantage. I don't expect every duo to have as good of a chemistry in a 2-man game as like Jamal and Jokic. But I've seen Luka and Kyrie do more and more creative and better things with this. Not so much in the playoffs, which we've talked about, how they haven't gone to the 2-man game as much throughout the playoffs, even in moments when I thought like this is like maybe the best way to attack the defense as a team is defending you. They don't go to it. Then the finals comes around and it's like I see it as a very viable option in this series, but they're either not going to it, or when they do, they don't really like know how to optimize it.
Yeah, and maybe it's like partly just because they know they're going to switch it. So they're like, well, it's not going to matter. I'm not sure what they're really thinking, but I thought we'd see more off ball screens to get KP or somebody on someone that can be more of a role threat. Just something like that. And we haven't really seen it yet. But whatever the Mavs do, they're definitely going to have to work for it to get the looks, because I feel like they're just deciding to ISO, or, yeah, just like their organization and decision making and whatever they're trying to do on offense is a little bit short-sighted, whereas I think whatever they need to do
Yeah.
is gonna take some effort by everybody, and it's not gonna be just like Kyrie or Lucas sitting in the corner with their hands on their knees kind of thing. So yeah,
Which
if
is what's
they
happening right now.
yeah.
It's still crazy to me that they're not running more off-ball actions for Kyrie when Luka's on the floor. Just like spell him, and Luka could. I mean, Kyrie is actually like really good coming off of like even just like a DHO or like a wide pin down, whatever. Not just taking the shot, but he can make plays out of that too. And
Hmm.
Luka can just act as almost like a hub for the offense, and it would improve the space for Dallas for anybody that has to like cut or like drive downhill, because the way that Boston is defending Luka with whoever's on him one-on-one is pressuring him up to wherever he is. So if he can create, whether it's like top of the arc or whatever, that's creating just more space for the rest of the team to operate, and then Luka can just pass out of those situations. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just, I'm just like thinking like somebody who watches the Denver Nuggets, but don't listen to me. We're the only team that Boston didn't beat this year.
Yeah. The only other thing that I wanted to say that we didn't get to was, and I say this as a joke, but I actually do wonder, is this series more damaging for Rudy Gobert's reputation than the Wolves Mavs series? Because just KP being out there and stretching out Lively and or Gafford, because the rim protection was a huge story in that series, has really made it easy for Drew Holiday and others of the Celtics to just get really easy looks at the rim. Obviously, it is hard because you're stretched out. That's what the Celtics like to do. And they put you into rotation, so it's like a matchup thing. Everyone would love to have KP. So, but it's like everyone was kind of saying, wow, the Wolves kind of suck because of Rudy Gobert and like he didn't provide an offensive threat. And it's like now we're kind of seeing the Mavs struggle against a team that has like kind of spacing big.
I think that like people just like to hate on Rudy. I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but you're asking about like reputationally, what does this mean? For me, watching this series and comparing it to the Wolves series, I actually have more criticisms of Rudy's defensive choices than I even already did. And I talked extensively about the things that I thought I just questioned Rudy about, because they're like things that he allowed the Mavericks to get in that series, but didn't allow the Nuggets to get in that one. And in both instances, it was the choices that he made in individual, either one-on-one or in help situations. Offensively, I still don't like. I actually blame the Wolves perimeter players more, because I think outside of Mike Conley, the others just don't know how to play with Rudy. And I actually don't even think it's that complicated, because it's not like, oh, well, you have to be able to pass a lob and you can't get stuff at the rim. It's like, no, he'll go like screen and stuff like that too. Like a lot of people were praising Slow-Mo for directing the offense off the ball by just like screening and then like telling whoever had the ball to pass to whoever he was screening for. Rudy can do that stuff too. And he also can act not as like consistently like a hub of the offense, whatever, but he ran some like 2-man game with Mike Conley where he like finds him on a back cut or whatever as well. And I just think the other Wolves players just don't know how to play with Rudy. I think that he can be used in multiple ways and they just don't do it consistently, again, outside of Conley. I don't think that the Wolves are like comparing their perimeter personnel to the Celtics. Yeah, it would have helped if they could have gotten some better looks at the rim if Rudy wasn't down there, say, on a roll. But they didn't run a lot of pick and rolls with him anyway.
But he's not going to be able to just stand. Like even KP just standing in the 3-point.
Yeah, no. He can't just stand. He has to be active on every possession. But that's the thing is he is. When you look at the on-off ratings, like his screening provided so much offense, and they had over a 120 offense in some of these games with him on the floor compared to off, when we know what the Wolves offense looks like apparently when there's just like a basic rim protector standing in the paint. Just because the others aren't able to create their own separation without his screens. And he is active on every possession. So I have more criticisms personally of Rudy defensively now than I did. And I was defending him for the most part in that series until the end, because I thought it was just like really bad, particularly in those last 2 games, or in game like 3 and game 5. The offense, I still don't. Because it's like, yeah, everyone would love to have KP, but it's just him. Like, who else are you getting?
Yeah.
So yeah, you could criticize Rudy for being Rudy, but he's still like a top 10 center in the NBA, because most centers just can't provide what he gives you on either end of the, like, consistently screening on every possession. He's actually like really well conditioned.
Yeah, he is.
I don't want to like go on a whole like Rudy diatribe, but you asked me reputation,
it's funny,
and I have a lot of thoughts.
It's funny getting back to talking about the Wolves and Rudy Gobert. I didn't anticipate this in this episode at all, but I just sometimes you see these series and it makes you think about the previous series. I just sometimes, people have gone out there arguing that Ant is not going to work next to Rudy because he's either not good enough of a playmaker or whatever they bring to the table on offense. They're not going to be able to reconcile that. And you want to build your team around your star and give them the biggest chance for success. And
Yeah.
You do see how easy the Celtics reads have been. But like you said, what player out there can you replace Rudy Gobert with who can shoot from the outside and still provide something on defense? I
Right.
don't know who that is, but we do
I
want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on the Celtics easy reads thing. Like, yeah, it's great when you have a team that makes it this. That's the thing, is they built this team around Jason Tatum and making his life as like easy as possible on the way to a championship, right? His reads are easy, everyone else's reads are easy. No one has to make tough decisions. Everyone gets good shots all the time. But most teams can't do that, and it's still fine because the player that they have as their best player like shoots better than 46% true shooting, or was it 42% true shooting
42% true
in
shooting
an
for Tatum.
NBA finals game? And they like, or they are just better higher level decision makers than that, and they don't need like every read to be as easy as it is throughout the flow of the Boston Celtics offense, which is like fine, it's working for them. But I
Hmm.
think it's like, man, I wish we were like that team. It's like, well, but you're not. So you have to figure
Yeah,
out how to optimize your
your
guys.
personnel. Yep. That is the name of the game of the NBA moving forward, and I think it's more fun for it. So, speaking of teams retooling and revamping and maximizing their personnel, let's move to the LA Lakers and their coaching search, because we just got on and recorded this episode like a couple hours after the Dan Hurley news broke that he's going to stay with the UConn Huskies, turning down the 6 year, what
Yeah.
was it, 6 year, 70 million?
$70 million for 6 years. Dan Hurley said, no, I'm staying at UConn. Everyone had the Leonardo DiCaprio from The Wolf of Wall Street clip going around. It was like Dan Hurley in the Huskies locker room. It's like, I'm fucking staying. I'm sure it was a bit of a celebration in there. I really was hoping that we'd get like a clip of like a press conference, like everyone like celebrates that he gave the middle finger to the Lakers effectively by saying no after kind of dragging this out through the weekend. But what I wanted to do was kind of trace the Lakers coaching search. And now it's a coaching caper because the coach is missing. They still haven't found one officially yet. But I wanted to trace the sort of media story that was the Lakers coaching search. And we know that JJ Redick, as I talked about in a previous segment, is still, now that Dan says no, that Hurley said no, still at the forefront of that. But I wanted to just kind of talk about the media landscape around the Lakers coaching search and how the flow of information has been contorted throughout the process. All right, so March 19th, JJ Redick premieres his Mind the Game podcast with LeBron James. Everyone's freaking out. Oh my God, LeBron's doing a podcast. Do you think that the Mind the Game podcast was like a preliminary interview for the coaching search? Because we know that LeBron, like after the official stuff started, has liked JJ and preferred JJ over all the other candidates, even after Hurley came in the picture.
I don't know. It is so weird, and why this whole thing is so bizarre. At least, like, I don't think LeBron went into it thinking it was some interview. Did the Lakers owners and Rob Pelinka see it and go, hey, like, they have good chemistry and they think similarly about basketball. Let's look into that. Maybe. I mean, that has to be somewhat a part of it, because I know they want to appease LeBron. And I don't know if LeBron's threatening to leave. You never know what's going on with LeBron and his passive aggressive messages and his subtlety and what he wants and how he's using his leverage. But don't feel like,
Right.
yeah.
He's always doing that subtle stuff, right? But the two like little just bullet points I'll just like leave you to think about is that there had been reports for several weeks leading up to the premiere of this podcast that the relationship between Darvin and the entire Lakers locker room was incredibly strained because they were mad that he like questioned their effort or whatever in these games where their defense was terrible. And so I wouldn't say that he went into it thinking that, but it was sort of like probably in the back of his mind that he's like, I can't wait till this guy is gone. Okay, so on April 19th, a month later, Dan Hurley goes on the Old Man and the Three, that's JJ Redick's main podcast, to have an interview with JJ after he won his second NCAA tournament title. LeBron tweeted about Dan Hurley that same day because they had talked about him on the Mind the Game podcast the week before or something like that because they were so impressed with his offensive sets. LeBron said, "He's so damn good, along with his staff, super creative with their O, exclamation point. Love it." On April 15th, JJ Redick leaves Anthony Davis off of his DPOY ballot and his hypothetical, I don't know if they're hypothetical because he might have an actual vote, but his all defense teams. I just wanted to put that out there because it's relevant to Anthony Davis's preferences in coach as this search goes on. On April 22nd, the Lakers blew a 20-point lead to the Nuggets in game 2 of round 1 in the playoffs. And that kind of like sets the whole search in motion, right? Because that's the point where it's not just, oh, there's some like strained tension in the locker room. We kind of don't like this guy. Stories come out. It's like, okay, when is it? This guy's getting fired as soon as the series is over because we already know the Nuggets are going to win now that they've gone up 2-0. On May 3rd, the Lakers fired Darvin Ham. This is 4 days after they were officially eliminated in that game 5 on the second buzzer beater that Jamal had in that series. Yeah, Woj sent out the official dismissal tweet. What do you think the Lakers organization, and whenever I say Lakers organization, I'm basically just referring to Rob Pelinka and Jeannie Buss because they apparently have their own little clique. That's just the two of them where they have their own information and nobody else in the organization has it. And that's probably the case in a lot of front offices and owner relationships, but it seems particularly secretive in this one. But what do you think they think of Darvin Ham's tenure overall, given the fact that earlier in the season, they were putting out stories with, through their like Lakers people that are like sources in the organization, support Darvin Ham, want to keep him, blah, blah, blah. But then he gets fired 4 days after they get eliminated. And even though like months earlier, there were like explicit stories that were like, they told LeBron that Darvin Ham is not going to be fired, at least mid-season, right?
I just don't see any scenario where a journalist asks them about the current coach and they're like, yeah, we have some serious questions about him and we'll be evaluating that after the season. Like, you have to come out and just be like, we support him.
Like mid-season, you kind of have to. I will say, though, that like contrast to the Cavs, they had like the Athletic piece and like all of these stories about why he's bad. And then they put out like Woj had like a Woj bomb that wasn't an actual bomb that said that the Cavs organization is taking a serious look at JB Bickerstaff's tenure. This is well before he eventually does get fired, which I'll talk about in this timeline.
Yeah. Well, because I thought, then it was going to happen like in the middle of the season or something, and he ended up going the whole season.
Right.
But,
so it's a little different when it's mid-season. You're right. I think that's like the correct interpretation is that they're just trying to not be assholes mid-season. Like,
but ultimately, people. I think ultimately they thought he lost the locker room and probably questioned his rotations. I think many Lakers fans throughout the season were not happy with that and blame a lot of the Lakers getting to the 7 seed on that. Like, they didn't beat the Nuggets, whatever. They know that that's a tough matchup for them, but like they had to play the Nuggets because they were the 7 seed, which they blame on Darvin Ham.
Darvin gets fired. Actually, it was reported, I believe, the day before that the official firing was announced, that JJ Redick and Ty Lue had emerged as front runners in the coaching search. At the time, I thought, okay, Ty Lue is going to re-sign with the Clippers because the Clippers love him, and Steve Ballmer is absolutely going to give him whatever bag he needs to retain him. So about 3 weeks pass. We're at May 21st, and this is when the stories come out about how much the Lakers love JJ Redick. They compare him to Pat Riley. This is a quote from a story in The Athletic where they said the Lakers are infatuated with Redick's potential, according to league sources, viewing him as a Pat Riley-like coaching prospect. And I just want to put out there that Pat Riley was an assistant coach with the Lakers for 2 years before they actually gave him a head coaching job.
Yeah, so, what does that comparison even mean?
I don't know, it was like young, like vision, like he's like this charismatic guy, but there's a very big difference in experience. And I wanted to ask you this because do you think that the Lakers actually believed specific, like maybe they liked JJ Redick a lot, but did they believe that JJ Redick could be, quote, the next Pat Riley? Or do you think they liked this guy? He sounded really smart, and they know LeBron liked him, right? Because of the podcast. But they know how it looks optically hiring a guy who has no NBA coaching experience, no college coaching experience. Someone on Twitter was joking today, one of our favorite draft guys on Twitter, CT Fazio, has more coaching experience than JJ Redick because he coaches middle school. JJ Redick talks about coaching his son's team. He's in elementary school, I believe. But were they trying to like bolster him up and try to like, I don't know, clean up his image before they hired JJ just so that they don't look crazy, even though they're out here comparing him to Pat Riley?
I definitely think they were doing that. But I think it was like a slow growing plan rather than like a deliberate, like, hey, let's compare him to Riley so that people don't think we're crazy. It's that they are crazy. So,
Okay.
so they're just like, hey, JJ Redick might be good. Then
Yeah.
the comparisons start coming in, and I think they actually believe that he might be a Pat Riley like young charismatic guy who has this vision for the future, who's
They're all
fresh
about the
and
flash. They're like,
yeah, the
he
Lakers.
is charismatic. He's a great podcaster. He's on ESPN. He's like, he just presents himself really well, right? So inevitably, if you like people that interview well, you're going to like JJ Redick. But if you don't look for substance beyond that, not that JJ wouldn't have it, but there are serious questions about what kind of NBA caliber head coach he would be without any of that experience,
hmm
right?
Honestly, I'm thinking more of a Steve Nash thing than a Pat Riley thing because I could see that where it's like, yeah, he could get along with the guys. He could put together a really good staff. I mean, like Steve Nash had D'Antoni as an assistant, which is pretty wild. It didn't
That's
go as well
crazy.
as people thought, but like JJ Redick might be able to get a good staff together.
Yeah.
He can get along with the guys. And we know coaching is about building relationships with guys as well. It's not just the schematics. JJ Redick is a knowledgeable basketball person. Is he going to be able to be the kind of coach that's going to come up with these amazing adjustments and these great game plans in a very competitive league? That's yet to be seen. But
I mean, maybe,
um,
but maybe that's only like 2% of the job because like you have to get your guys healthy to the postseason and get them through that 82 game grind
yeah,
without like
managing that.
hating each other.
But yeah, keep
So
going with the timeline.
so May 23rd, JB Bickerstaff finally gets officially fired from the Cavs, and James Borrego, who is another name near the top of the candidate list for the Lakers, is announced as one of the leading candidates for that job. Next day, Rich Paul, who is LeBron's agent and Anthony Davis's agent, there's no conflict of interest there, tells the Lakers that basically they need to focus on Anthony Davis more in their coaching search. He says, in my opinion, the Lakers' focus should probably be more so on Anthony Davis than LeBron at this point. A lot of people at the time read that as like, oh, is he like trying to put out like subtle messages on LeBron's behalf, right? To be like, oh, maybe he is leaving this summer. Like, don't think about him in your plans, blah, blah, blah. Or just like the general, like LeBron keeps and through his people keeps trying to put this idea out there that he's not hands-on, not very involved in this Lakers coaching search. And then on May 27th, it's reported that JJ was targeting these assistants, and we talked about that on a previous segment that included James Borrego, who is another head coaching candidate, Sam Cassell, who is another candidate for the head coach position at the Lakers, and I think Jared Dudley, who would be coming from the
The
Mavs.
Mavs.
I can rationalize that the Lakers were the ones that put this out there, like I did for the Pat Riley thing, that they wanted to put it out there that like, oh, JJ's targeting these like very experienced NBA coaches to be on his assistant coaching staff, right? Do you actually think that it was the Lakers who put this out there, or do you think it was JJ's people? Because you could make arguments that either benefits, and then like regardless of who it benefits, do you think that JJ did the right, if it was him, do you think he did the right thing by putting like this out there that like, oh, these other like guys I'm competing with for this position, actually I'm looking at them to put on my staff, if it was him? But if you think it was the Lakers, like, yeah, I just wanted to know what you thought about that.
I feel like a lot of people were kind of like clowning the Lakers for seriously considering JJ Redick. I don't think it was met with a lot of positivity. So I actually think it was Borrego who leaked it because he was like, they're
Ooh.
considering JJ Redick over
They
me. Are
really
you
want to
kidding
try
me?
to hire me as JJ Redick's assistant?
And he's
That'd be
putting that out
really
there.
funny.
He put it out
Borrego's
there.
actually pulling
Yeah.
all these strings. And everyone's like, oh, he's so boring. Like, there's no, like, vision, whatever. And he's like, I'll show you.
Yeah. He's
I'll
like, I
show you
can't believe this. I'm
machinations.
leaking this shit. Like JJ contacted him and he's like, are you kidding me?
Well,
But I don't know.
one of the Lakers guys has his own like conspiracy corner segment. He puts an actual tinfoil hat on, and I actually love this tinfoil hat theory that James Borrego is actually the
There
one
you
leaking
go.
all of this stuff. Okay, so like you said, it was met with a lot of, I think, side eye and derision when it was like, seriously, the Lakers are actually on this path to hiring JJ Redick to be their head coach. And then it was reported that the Lakers had not yet made a decision officially, and they're still between people, even though, like, for weeks, it was just positive stuff about JJ. So June 4th comes around, and this is where the big Shams tweet that the Lakers are zeroing in on JJ Redick. And I'm like, okay, like, it's coming. Like, here we go. And the next day, league sources came out and said that they actually they've heard that Anthony Davis wants Borrego over JJ, which is really funny. Maybe plays into this theory that Borrego has been maybe more active in the in this leaking small bits of information game than anyone thought. So this is a loaded question, but in light of everything we know now with the Hurley stuff and all of that, the fact that 80's favorite candidate seems to be an add-on whenever they talk about these lists, and especially after Hurley's name came into the picture, it was like, well, Hurley and JJ Redick, even when the Lakers were pretending like we're still kind of deciding between who we want more or whatever. And then Borrego is also, still on the list. But Rich Paul had to say, like, in my opinion, they should be focusing more on AD and whatever. And maybe it was more about like subtle LeBron hints, but AD is also his client. Like, I just want to know, do you actually think that the Lakers organization, i.e. Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka, respect Anthony Davis as their franchise superstar?
I think they assume that he's going to be their franchise superstar. Maybe their actions aren't respecting him enough. I'm not sure. Maybe this is some kind of a statement from Rich Paul where he's telling them like, hey, like AD isn't some guarantee to be on your team for forever because as soon as LeBron's done, he's bolting for somebody else. So you better make him happy. But also, LeBron has always been on this like, and this goes back to the Cavs with Kyrie of this like torch passing like mindset where he's like, I want this to be Kyrie's team, and I want this to be
Yeah.
AD's team, and here I'll give you my number, AD, and like let's make this about you. And like I think LeBron also truly believes he needs AD to be one of the best players in the world to like win
Yeah.
a championship before he retires. So I think there's like a lot of different things going on, but it is an interesting comment from Rich Paul about AD, and maybe they should hire a coach with AD in mind. I'm not sure.
So that same day, a piece came out in The Athletic. This is like the whole, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, whitewashing of trying to hire JJ Redick machine. But that piece talked about how there are no doubts about JJ Redick's work ethic, particularly in comparison to Darvin Ham's. One of the common internal complaints with Ham was his lack of preparation. This was not something that came out during the season. Of all the complaints about him, by the way, that I followed, and I heard a lot of Lakers complaining about different aspects of Darvin Ham's coaching throughout the season. The work ethic and unpreparedness was not necessarily one of them. This kind of harkens back to that one comment that Anthony Davis made in that round one series, though, where he said, it was after, I think it was after game 2 or 3, maybe, where he's like, we're just out there sometimes, but we don't know what we're doing. And I thought that was a shot at, like, a very specific shot at Darvin Ham. So I'm not saying that this isn't true, but the fact that you're putting this very specific thing out there, attacking his work character, after you've already fired him, like, you don't have to deal with this guy anymore. This is well over a month after you fired him. And it feels like it's in service of, and it is, like, literally the sentence starts with, there's no doubt about JJ Redick's worth, that, like, particularly in comparison to Darvin Ham. It just feels very, like, mean and unnecessary. And it feels like it's coming from the Lakers more so than, I mean, it is, because it's literally like weird. It's a quote here. Like, there are no doubts about it. And internal complaints within the organization.
Yep.
It's just one of those things that makes you like, I saw this and thought, like, man, why would anyone want to, not anyone, but why would a lot of good coaches that can get a high level job somewhere else want to come here when this is how they treat you on the way out?
If you're signing up for it, you got to be ready. I mean, I think most people involved with the Lakers organization, from the players to the coaching staff, know that they're going to be under a lot of scrutiny just because of the nature of the franchise. So
No, I completely agree. It's just like, it just feels like a shit show. Like, I don't know what kind of operation they're running over there, and it just keeps getting worse. So, okay, again, same day that Darvin piece comes out, it's all like blending together. JJ goes on podcast, and he gets asked directly about the Shams tweet that says, oh, they're zeroing in on JJ Redick. And he's like, I'm focused on the finals, 100% focused on calling the finals. And Shams, emphasis on Shams, who broke it, will be addressed after the season. So here's my question to you. And this, because this part's a little complicated because my thoughts on it changed a lot over the last 5 days or so. Did JJ fuck himself here? By that, I mean, originally we thought that the ESPN and the NBA Finals wanted to keep the announcement under wraps. We were like, okay, JJ's a lock. They've talked about, like, he's hiring these high-level assistant coaches, everybody. Don't worry, everything's going to be smooth. But that's done. But maybe NBA and ESPN want to keep the focus on the finals. So we want to keep this coaching announcement under wraps, particularly because JJ is calling the finals. I don't think they'd care if he wasn't on the finals broadcast team, for example. But what if what really happened is that JJ got a little too confident in this because he's had this, like, month-long just, like, media praise coming out of the Lakers organization about how much they like him and how good they think he'll be. And he's thinking, I'm their number one guy. I don't have any real competition. They just have this Borrego guy on these lists just to show that they're looking at other people. They're calling me the next Pat Riley. Maybe he made the Lakers wait before he actually accepted an offer. Now we know that they hadn't actually offered him something yet, right? Because they were able to go after Hurley, or maybe they were in the middle of discussions with JJ, who knows? Or maybe he's playing hardball with, like, the contract negotiations, because, like I said, we don't know how far that went. Do you think it was that actually, and not, oh, the Lakers have already offered him something and, like, it's basically wrapped up?
do I think that it's agreed upon? Is that what you're asking? Already?
Yeah, or
do you
did,
think
like,
he's negotiating?
was this like JJ waiting maybe too long and maybe, like, risking getting this job, as we know from the events of last week with all the Hurley news, because he thought, well, I don't actually have any competition, so I'm gonna make him sweat it out a little bit.
But he'd only need to have him sweat it out if he, like, didn't like the offer, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm like, and JJ's very, very successful. I don't know if he's, like, has some number in mind that he would, like, hit for me to leave this ESPN job and my podcast and all this shit.
Maybe it's years, like he wants
Yeah,
security, or
yeah, it could be. I don't know what it is. There was rumors though that the Lakers wanted to, like, get it done during the finals and not after. And I don't know,
right.
maybe it
That's
was
why I
like,
thought, oh, are they, like, impatient because ESPN's not letting JJ? Or maybe they're impatient with JJ and it's actually his decision to, or had been his decision to not, like, formally accept this and, like, get the ball rolling.
I could also see, like, it being simple and it just being JJ just thinking, like, I think it's just, like, the right thing to do for me to just focus on me calling this finals than, like,
You're taking him at face value? That's
I
not what
c-
this exercise is about, Will.
I could just see that being the simple answer, but who knows? Maybe maybe he didn't like the offer.
Okay. So that podcast appearance happens June 5th. June 6th, we get the big Woj bomb. Breaking: the Los Angeles Lakers are targeting Connecticut's Dan Hurley to become the franchise's next coach and are preparing a massive long-term contract offer to bring the back-to-back national champion to the NBA. That comes out. ESPN sources say the Lakers have had preliminary contact with Hurley, and sides are planning to escalate discussions in the coming days. Hurley's been at the forefront of the Lakers search from the beginning of the process, even though they just made preliminary contact on this day that you're making this announcement. Even though while the organization has done its due diligence, this is the part where it's like, okay, this is like Lakers fluff. Like, we're just doing our due diligence looking at all these other candidates, but actually you've been our guy the whole time. And also, Rob Pelinka and Jeannie Buss are eager to formally discuss their vision with Hurley of marrying his dominant program built upon his tactical acumen and elite player development to the storied Lakers brand. That's like, okay, he got like half of that from Hurley and half of that from Jeannie Buss.
The language of this is so funny to me because Jeannie Buss is such like I want to run the Lakers like a family business, and then it's like Hurley is marrying his dominant program. Like, they're so obsessed with this weird like family shit.
It is strange, right? And then on top of that, they're like, well, these are two very different coaches. Like JJ, last year, I knew he interviewed for the Raptors job. Who knows if he interviewed for other jobs that were available last year? But that's why I was surprised that he was really on the Lakers' radar, because I thought that JJ, if anything, was going to be interested in coaching in like a newer, like rebuild situation, low pressure, working with younger players, things like that. But apparently not. And he was ready to like jump on to maybe the highest pressure coaching job in the NBA just by virtue of every aspect of that context, working with LeBron and everything. But they come out with reasons that they want Hurley and why he's like the perfect guy for the job. And they say that the perfect allure traces back to the changing landscape of the NBA. They want him to come in because he's so good at young player development and scouting. They want him to help basically enhance their young core of Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, and Max Christie. And because with the changing CBA, they're going to rely more on their draft picks and young players and like all this stuff. When months ago we heard that the Lakers were planning on trading 3 draft picks, etc., for a star this summer.
I didn't know like how this fit would work with the Lakers, where they're very win now. Like, LeBron needs to win now. He can't rely on Max Christie and Rui Hachimura. They need like, but it's hard. The NBA is different now, so I get like kind of wanting to change the approach, but still, this doesn't.
But it's
sense.
like on a dime. It's not like this
Yeah.
has been their plan for. It's the complete opposite of everything that they've put out there over the last few months. Compared to, it's not that it's a very sound strategy, and it sounds sound. It sounds good, right? Because it makes sense. But I just don't believe that that was their intent. Just like I don't believe that Hurley was their guy all along, and they'd only just met with him when they announced that they were talking to him or had been looking at it the whole time. Like, it just sounds like they're trying to sound like an organization that like does things the right way and like does things that make sense in an organized way that has a good process and ends up with like finding the best candidates and whatever, but then they end up telling on themselves every step of the way.
That's pretty much what it is.
Okay, so then we get to the final phase of this. I'll just go through the rest of the headlines and we can discuss the end of it. We talked about the Lakers like process as an organization. It was actually revealed in an article that came out the same day as the Hurley stuff that JJ was the first and only candidate to that point that had a face-to-face meeting with the Lakers. Over a month has happened since they fired Darvin Ham. If this is true, that's absolutely crazy. That happens. They announced they're looking at Hurley. Actually, he's our guy. I can't imagine how JJ Redick is feeling at this time, especially if he's the one that kind of delayed, moving on to the next stage of that process. Like, oh, fuck, what have I done? But Hurley reportedly flies out to Los Angeles the following Friday to meet with the Lakers organization, which is Rob Pelinka and Jeannie Buss. And they're going to lay out this grand vision and how we're going to marry our storied franchise with your, I don't know, program building and offense and whatever. The following Saturday night, he is pictured at a Billy Joel concert because he's there with his assistant coach who posts the video on IG. And I'm only talking about this because it was a huge story on Twitter. Both fan bases were absolutely beside themselves trying to figure out if this meant that he was like celebrating because he had just taken the job in LA, or oh, he's already back, which means he didn't want to stay there and they let him leave without making a decision, so he's probably going to stay with UConn. Who knows, right? Well, now we know. Then it was announced in the pregame show of Game 2 of the NBA Finals that Hurley was going to think it over and announce his decision on Monday, which was the next day. We didn't talk about this, but Game 1 of the NBA Finals in the pregame show and during halftime was littered with talking about the announcement that the Lakers were pursuing Hurley. So that was the Lakers' way of trying to poke the Celtics in the eye when they're in the NBA Finals.
That's funny.
By just dominating the media cycle. I mean, it kind of worked, right? So finally we come to today, the day that we're recording, June 10th, Monday. I was up very early because I had no idea what time this would be announced. I know it's East Coast and I live in the Pacific time zone. Hurley is an absolute egomaniac is what I learned through the couple of hours that I was up before this announcement this morning, because everyone's freaking out about when this decision is going to be made. I thought it might be a first thing in the morning thing. There was no time announced. Eventually, it's announced there's going to be some kind of press conference, but it doesn't actually, I don't know, materialize in a way where there's like a stream or something you can find. The UConn men's basketball practice was scheduled for some time block between 12 and 4, and that's apparently the normal way that they do it. But then at 12 Eastern time, they move it back 2 hours. And everyone's freaking out for an additional 2 hours or hour and a half, because eventually, while everyone's looking for Hurley, they're like standing outside the practice facility in all these clips that people are posting. He had apparently just kind of been in the building, and then his wife shows up in her car. And everyone's like, oh my God, does she always come to practices? There's no way they're not announcing that they're leaving now. Everyone's like dissecting every like little, bit of information on both sides of this, because UConn men's basketball, like their fans are serious. Like the Northeast does not play when it comes to their basketball. Finally, it was announced by Woj, because the actual announcement came behind closed doors because Hurley was just telling his players, as it turns out, and Woj, that he turned down the Los Angeles Lakers, their 6-year, $70 million offer. It was a no for him, and he's going to return to UConn to chase a third straight national title. The follow-up tweet from Woj, and this is the last news bit we'll talk about, is that after a dogged pursuit of Hurley over the past weeks, Lakers will regroup and resume bringing in candidates for interviews with the hope of hiring a coach by draft night, sources said. James Borrego is expected to remain part of the group of Lakers who could do their first formal interview with JJ Redick. Here's my question. Why have the Lakers not conducted formal interviews yet? What have they been doing for the last 6 weeks, even before Dan Hurley apparently became like pseudo available?
Maybe they said that to like somehow back up the fact that Hurley was always their like focus. So like, we haven't interviewed anyone else, so we were focused on Hurley. And we were only gearing up to offer to Redick because we didn't know Hurley was available.
But it makes them sound so much worse.
Yeah, I have no idea
They were
why.
about to offer to Redick without having conducted a formal interview, though? Like, it's also twisted.
Yeah, who knows what, like, this language means to them. I don't know what their process is or whatever, but that part is probably the weirdest one to me, where I'm the most confused.
Anyway, this saga actually, unfortunately, continues. I thought maybe Hurley accepts the offer and we're just kind of like, wow, the Lakers actually got what they wanted. They just like bumbled into like the best coach in college basketball to come like run their program. And they'll still suck, right? Because their roster has like issues and they don't want to pay a luxury tax. But it's been an interesting tale, I will say, to just follow from the media perspective, because of all of the different camps that leaked to all these different media outlets and how they have their own agendas, right? You had the Woj versus Shams battle because Shams says they're zeroing in on JJ Redick. And the next day, Woj is like, actually, they've been trying to get Hurley this whole time. Like, that's weird. Okay, sure. But also, I don't believe you. Or your sources, rather. Yeah, do you have any like closing thoughts on the whole saga?
The whole saga reminded me a little of Kawhi Watch, Um,
Mm,
I,
Hurley Watch.
Hurley Watch, yeah. Both of those involve the Lakers, obviously, because that is how the Lakers roll. People, they're very popular, so the speculation's going to be massive, and it's going to be in the limelight. I think that it probably would have been a good hire. Obviously, I don't know how it would have worked out, and I don't know what their strategy really would have been, and what their roster looks like, and what Hurley's vision is for the roster. I guess that would change depending on what coach they get. I think it would have been a good coaching hire. I'm more skeptical of Redick than I am of Hurley, obviously. So,
Both would have an adjustment period because the NBA is just different than everything else, but at least Hurley
mhm,
has like some experience trying to manage an entire program.
so I'm skeptical of the Redick thing, but I kind of want to see it just as a fan. It sounds fun to watch.
The last thing that I'll just leave our listeners with on this story is that Hurley had his own incentives in all of this. He rejected a reportedly similarly lucrative deal from the University of Kentucky. So that kind of indicated to you that like you had to give him something like a real reason to want to leave UConn, and maybe it would have been enough in another timeline for it to have been like, oh wow, the Lakers, what a storied organization. But he was also kind of up and in the middle of negotiations for a contract extension with UConn, and I'm sure having the Lakers pursue him helped to elevate that. I really like the idea of James Borrego be playing puppet master in
hmm
like the initial stages of all of this. So I'm going to run with that theory for a little bit. I just wanted to let our listeners know that next episode we are doing a mailbag. So send us your questions about the finals, the off season. Finals might be over by the time we do that mailbag, so keep that in mind. Questions about other teams, questions about the Nuggets especially. We love talking about the Nuggets. Yeah, just let us know and we'll read them on the show and let you know our answers. But please remember to like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, share these videos if you like them, hit the notification bell, leave us a review. We're on Spotify and Apple, or not Apple Music yet. We're working on it still. Amazon Music, we are there. And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks.